Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Blacklist. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I think it's kind of an interesting development in this episode, obviously, with the revelation last episode that Marvin was behind everything. And it's interesting in this episode how we cut back and forth between Reddington and Marvin. I always think that's kind of an interesting thing that the show has from time to time, where it's like when you have your main overarching villain, because obviously they did a little bit with like the Liz situation of kind of like seeing like the other side of what she was up to, and now we kind of, you know, they don't do it too often, but it just kind of reminds me also a little bit of like Reddington being in this situation is kind of like the Townsend situation, the Liz situation, I guess the fake Katarina situation, and also the Kate situation. So I think that's kind of fascinating. But getting Marvin's perspective on things where he is playing things out with LaCroix, which is also like, yeah, because he referenced it last episode, but I didn't even think about it, because I was like, right, he did say he had to sacrifice his friends for this. It's like, yeah, this is a guy that you went to his wedding and everything. You guys go back to college days, which I love that whole, what was it, that Fools Something game that they came out with. It's like, that's kind of an effed up game of like, yeah, let's try and basically create the perfect crime. I mean, I guess like, everyone's got their games, but it's so interesting. It's like, and I guess it speaks volumes about who LaCroix is. The fact is, he was like, oh man, you want to do this? I'm down for it. It's like, well, I guess it's like, let's not pretend, let's not mince words. We're both criminals. We both do terrible things. So it's like, for them to have it, like, the fact is his friend was so ready to jump on top of it. But it's like, right, LaCroix already had his thing with Reginald Cole already. Well, at least later on. Who knows if working with Marvin in this way eventually let him go like, you know, I'm going to do my own shady stuff. Or he probably did the shady stuff beforehand. That's probably why him and Marvin clicked so well together. I mean, maybe they were kind of the same way back in their college days or not. But Marvin couldn't stand the fact is that Reddington was going to leave everything to Liz. Obviously, like I said, we cut back to, yeah, I think that, if I remember correctly, the episode opens with Marvin's perspective on the Liz thing. Once again, never the biggest fan of Liz, but even he, I mean, it makes you wonder, actually, does he feel bad about killing Liz? Or is it more so like, oh my god, I had to hurt Reddington? I feel like it actually leans more towards like, oh, I feel bad because I only feel bad about killing Liz because of how much it hurts Reddington. He loves Red so much. Red's his entire world. So, but also, once again, I mean, it's not like this is too much of a surprise, but the task force and Reddington don't see eye to eye on how to approach this situation. I mean, obviously, it's happened from time to time over the course of the series, but obviously, Harold wants Marvin captured, because that's the best way he can clear his name of everything. But Reddington's like, no, Marvin needs to die. He can never see the inside of a jail cell because, well, he already did go to jail, but it's a different situation. At least back then, Marvin was loyal to Reddington. This is someone that will cut a deal. He will throw us all under the bus, destroy everything that I've built. This empire, which, you know, the Blacklist, everything, the task force will all get burned to the ground if Marvin goes to jail. Because as Reddington references, it's like, right, like he's kind of, he's just like Kate. Kate and Marvin are the two people who could do the most damage to this organization. Kate dealt her blows back in the day when Marvin has too. So this is like some next level betrayal, just like the Kate situation. So, because Kate literally, she goes back even further than, Marvin, obviously, so she was always kind of like, her blows could be a lot more cutthroat because she even knew where, I don't know, I don't think Marvin knows where the bodies are buried. I think only Kate knew where they were. I think Dembe as well. But, so it makes this whole Marvin thing cut that much deeper. And so it is a race against the clock as both sides are trying to get to Marvin before the other. Because Reddington's like, yeah, I sympathize with your situation, Harold, and I will try my best to mitigate everything. But for Harold, it's like, no, like, Agnes needs me. She can't lose another parent, and that's what's going to happen if I go to jail. And Reddington's right, you just got to have faith in me. But Harold couldn't, I mean, everything is riding on this, and he can't trust Reddington not to get consumed by his rage and just kill Marvin the moment he gets the opportunity to. We already saw where he was heading with Hetty, so it's like, you really think we're going to give you that opportunity with Marvin? So, It was even interesting that we even got that heart-to-heart between him and, was it Van Dyke? Because their dynamics, it's like, right, Townsend was your mentor and friend, like the way he looked at you, it almost felt like the warmth of the sun bounced across your face. Because Van Dyke did seem crazily loyal to Townsend, but now it's like, right, we see what, like, Marvin's obsession with Reddington, they are two peas in the same pod. It's like, I know, so you want to exact your revenge, perform the last act that Townsend, your mentor, the person you cared about most, wanted. You do this, and it's almost like, I don't know if Van Dyke was under the impression like he wasn't going to make it out of this, but at the very least, he can hurt Reddington in the process, so. Because even at the end of it all, Marvin never wanted Reddington dead. Just wanted Liz dead in front of him to hurt him, to kind of pain him in a way that obviously sent him on hiatus for 2 years. And now Weecha's condition's getting worse. Mirsay is just ready to leave him at any moment. Just got to stay for Weecha's sake and make sure she's okay. But also, she plans on getting her sister and leaving Reddington. So, and even saying later on that no one will ever be safe around Reddington. And it's like, right, his entire world's come crashing down. The two other women in his life that he cares about so much, they will leave. Weecha will want to stay, but Mirsay's not going to be okay with that. And after this, I don't know if Reddington would feel okay leaving, like, especially if things get, like, even if she gets better, her condition will probably be like a pretty long-standing thing that he probably doesn't want to drag her deeper into all of this. Plus, obviously, he's on the outs with the task force to some extent. Dembe, however, decides to work with Reddington because it's like, right, in this time of turmoil, he needs someone by his side, especially considering Weecha's not there, so he's kind of down a bodyguard. So Dembe wants to do this because this is longtime friend and obviously associate, so I got to do whatever I can to help him. But my loyalty is going to be to this task force and helping you out. So he was able to convince Harold to kind of give him the time away to do this. And Reddington tried to gather up his forces, those who hadn't already swayed over to Marvin's side, which one of the people showing up, who was the last one to show up, did. That's probably why he showed up last. And Reddington opened the door, blast, 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 and just kept it going, kept it moving. So, sadly, Marvin is very good at what he does, and everywhere he's ever been, he's got bugged. So, they have to be careful about where they go and what they say in certain places. So, luckily, the assault on the cabin they were at ended with the FBI showing up because Reddington had a radio, got in contact with a trucker who then got in contact with the FBI, so that worked out. But it was almost beautiful to see Reddington and Dembe like fully on the same side again. It's just like, right, like, have I told you how much I missed you? It's like, yeah, because I'm sure without Liz around, he probably felt incomplete, especially without Dembe around, too, because those two are always kind of like, almost like his left and right to some extent, I think. And not having lost his left hand, Liz, obviously she's so much more, but still. And then not having Dembe around his right hand. I even thought it was interesting, once again, into that point of Marvin saying, like, hey, I want Reddington dead, but I want it quick. I don't want him to suffer because, once again, at the end of the day, he still loves Red, and so he needs this to be over quick. Run the end. Like, I'm wondering I wonder what is Marvin's end game when it comes to all of this. Like, he never really explained, like, once he kills Reddington, what are you going to do about the task force? Are you going to kill a whole bunch of FBI agents? I guess it's like, right, once the task force is done, once Reddington's dead, you won't have to work. What's he going? I mean, you don't think he was going to try and become like the next Reddington in the regard? I mean, we already know business and criminal empire wise, but do you think he was going to try and strike a deal like, right, well, he doesn't have access to the Blacklist. Only Reddington does, so he wouldn't even be able to pull that card. So I don't know, because even Marvin's got access to a lot of the Empire. Obviously, he has a lot of connections in that regard, but there's still even blind spots he doesn't have, like, he doesn't have access to, like the Blacklist. So, I don't know. I guess he's just like, right, without Reddington, the Blacklist is as good as done, so the task force is done. and Harold would eventually go to jail. I don't know what he wanted what the aftermath of that would have been like, because the FBI would have kept hunting you, but he would have been on the run and would have, I guess, survived just like Reddington did for so long on the top of the FBI's most wanted list. So I guess maybe that's the justification for it. I don't know. I don't know how much Marvin really... I mean, I'm sure he thought it through a lot with LaCroix and everything, but still. I thought it was really interesting the moment they interrogated Homedude, the guy that Marvin hired his army. And I love when they're like, all right, we're going to torture you. And they dunk him underwater. And it's like, huh. And it was for a while. And Reddington's like, wow, this isn't even fun. And Dimbay's like, how long has it been? It's like, holy crap, 18 minutes. What's the word record for this? It's like there's this psychotic fun that they're having. And Homedude ended up breaking. It is interesting that they didn't have to torture him in a more traditional sense, but it was more so breaking him mentally. But like, right, you believe yourself to be strong. That's the ignorance of youth believing yourself indestructible, invincible. But then the cruel lesson that Reddington taught him is like, you're not. You know, because I guess he thought like, right, he could take it. Because even Reddington's like, wow, most people would panic upon being drowned like that, but he remained calm for, once again, like 18 minutes. So, pretty impressive. They got the information they needed about where Homedude and Marvin were going to meet up. And they even thought it was interesting that Dimbay was able to convince Reddington not to kill Homedude. It's like, right, you guys can find out the information yourself, but I promised Reddington I wouldn't say anything. But I kept wondering about that, where Dimbay kept looking at the security cameras. I was like, what's that about? Right. He ended up pointing the task force towards the security cameras so they could listen in on the conversation and find out the same information that they did. But Reddington's planning on setting a trap. Him and Dimbay are having a conversation. Dimbay's in the car because they know that Marvin is listening. And that's the thing. Marvin thinks he's so... I mean, to be fair, they didn't know because of the whole cabin thing. But it's like, right, you caught Reddington with his shoes tied together in this moment. Yeah, he tripped and fell, but it's not going to happen again. In fact, Reddington was waiting for you, but the task force is a little bit behind. Like, none of them, whether it be Dimbay or Wrestler, who was in a chopper at the time, would have made it in time. So I did like the really interesting conversation between Reddington and Marvin. He's like, right, everything, you won't realize it, but everything I did was because I love you. It's like, you love me so much that you had Liz killed, the person I love most in the world. And he's like, right, you forced me into this situation. You forced my hand by choosing her as your successor. Because even Marvin admitted to LaCroix, he's like, I've never understood why he cares so much for that girl. And it's like, right, you don't know. I brought this whole point up last episode. You thought he'd get over it. I was like, but that's also the thing. That was idiotic of you to think, oh, like Reddington, like, I guess at the very least you were hoping he'd be heartbroken, he'd get over it and come back and everything would be fun. Like, you didn't want to be second fiddle again. I guess even if you did, like, you were hoping that Reddington would decide to give you the business, but when he came back, he took over things and then he starts pulling at the thread of what you did. So, because the way he said it before, he made it sound like he was hoping that Reddington would get over Liz's death and then, like, I guess eventually decide, like, right, I'm going to pass it on to you. I guess he wasn't expecting Reddington to disappear for, like, the 2 years that he did, but he took advantage of it. But he made it sound like, oh, you would eventually come back, you'd get over the death or whatever. And maybe he was thinking, like, right, Reddington will live his life and be fine. Did not think that Reddington would be such a mess after Liz's death, but I don't know what your end goal really was, besides putting yourself in this position because you believe yourself to be the rightful heir to all of this. You deserve all this. You helped build it up. It's like, no, you don't. This was always supposed to be Liz's. This entire organization, this entire criminal enterprise was started for her sake. Not only was this supposed to be her protection, once I said it last episode, this was her inheritance. This was her legacy, especially because it's all about the Blacklist too. So this was never yours to begin with. You were just another cog in a machine. And I love that Reddington was like, right, you may think you know me so well, but I know you better than you, Marv. I saw something in you 30 years ago. And Marvin's like, what is it? He's like, a void. A void that I knew that basically you'd suckle to me, that I'd I'd be your hope, your kind of like your despair. Like I'd be essentially your everything. Like I ended up. That you were never going to be, you never would be, and never can be the leader. That your job, your position will always be to follow. And it's kind of putting Marvin in his place. This is you might think you have me figured out, because the only reason why you got this far on your own is because you took the tapes that I left for those discs that I left for Liz. Without that, you wouldn't be where you are. You're not some this was never yours to lead. You know, you snatched away someone else's inheritance. You took the keys to the throne when you were never ready. You never would be ready, you know? And it's just like tearing him down in that moment to let him know that you were a dear friend. You were an ally. But goodness, you were never going to be a leader. This would never be yours. And you're saying that it's not fair. It's not fair that you took this from Liz because she was the rightful heir. She had everything. She had what it took. She kind of proved herself over the course of the series. She had exactly what it took to do this. But Marvin was just so like, no, it's mine. So, but Cooper trying to keep Reddington from getting to Marvin basically calls in an incident at the station or whatever that they're at. So Marvin ended up getting away, which Reddington is not too happy about it. He's like, right, any chance of clearing your name, any chance of getting revenge for Liz, it's going now because of you. So he's like, basically, you and me are done. Like, Reddington got uber pissed. Like, obviously he's had his issues with Aram recently of his leadership, but it's like in this moment, it's like, Harold, we're good. Like, we were friends. We're done right now because you kind of pull the gravest sin. You let the guy who killed Liz get away. This is unforgivable. So once I get what I need to get, like, I don't think it's like a thing of like, oh, we're done. But I just, like, Reddington's uber pissed right now. So, and now Cooper does realize the nature of, yeah, we did what we did because we know that we're going to have the full task force going after Marvin. We will find him again. But I love Reddington being like, there is no task force without me because I am your greatest asset. Without me, there is no Blacklist. There is nothing. There is no task force. And you've kind of like screwed that relationship up now doing what you've done. So, I mean, Dembe did kind of give them a helping hand. He's the one that suggested how they stop Reddington from getting to Marvin, gave him the security footage. Kind of playing both sides. He's helping Reddington without breaking his promise, but also keeping his loyalty to the FBI. Because it's also his way of honoring Liz as well in that regard. So he's kind of caught between both important people and important groups in his life, but also both sides representing Liz. You have Reddington representing Liz, and so is the task force and Harold representing Liz, because Liz would want to do whatever it takes to clear Harold's name as well. So it's definitely going to be fascinating to see where everything takes us going forward into the next episode, which I do believe is the season finale. So how this whole thing wraps up. Will Harold's name get cleared? Will Marvin walk away from this dead? I see that being a strong possibility. Will Reddington be able to kind of piece back together his organization? I'm curious where the oh God, I'm blanking on their names now. It's the organization that Reddington got pretty early on in the season. He has a tattoo of them. I'm blanking on them. It's like an early episode in the show. The Skinners, he hasn't really used them much in the grand scheme of the show since becoming like the head of that organization. I wonder, is it more so like it's just part of like the general zeitgeist of the criminal empire he has. So like he has been putting them to work, but it's just been a background thing because it kind of gets lumped into his empire. Or it would be interesting for that to come full circle, because that was at the very beginning of the season, and if that ends up coming into play at the very end here, like I said, maybe it's just kind of, it's just in the background, and maybe at later points in it can become a more prominent thing that he actively uses, or maybe he is actively using it and we're just once again not aware just because it gets lumped in with the criminal empire. But regardless, I'm interested to see how this all ends up playing out. Obviously, killing Marvin or whatever, like, what will this... He's just kind of a means... He's kind of outlived his usefulness now, because now he's more of a threat on so many different levels. Not only what you've done, but also what damage you could end up doing in the future, which we don't know if Reddington and the task force will necessarily get out of this unscathed. Will Harold get his name clear? Like, what's going to happen in that regard? I feel like this could, I think Harold's going to walk away with this, from this, with a cleared name, but I don't know. I'm leaning more towards that, but I still feel like it could go either way. It could be Reddington finds him first and kills him, but also helps clear Cooper's name in the process. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where things kind of go from there. I mean, even at the end of this all, will Aram still be in charge, or will Harold's cleared name allow him to take charge again, where things kind of go from there? Like I said, I doubt it's the end of their relationship, but what happens with Harold and Reddington going forward from here after this whole debacle this episode. Also, Mirsay and Wicha, what happens on that front? We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good